Nadal Malik Hassan, devout Muslim and mass murderer.
Today, I've confirmed that U.S. Army Major Nadal Malik Hassan, a 39-year-old psychiatrist assigned to Darnell Medical Center here at Fort Hood, has been charged with 13 specifications of premeditated murder under Article 118 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Hello, Bezel 333. I was having a discussion the other day with someone regarding the tragic events that occurred at Fort Hood, Texas. This individual, Nadal Malik Hassan, who spontaneously and indiscriminately shot defenseless soldiers, killing 13 and wounding dozens of others in the name of Allah. And my contention is that at least one of the main factors that brought him to the point of doing this cowardly and despicable act was the fact that he was a devout Muslim that believed in the teachings of Islam. Now, the person I was talking with disagreed and said he was just an isolated, lonely, disenfranchised individual who finally acted out in a very destructive manner. But I want to say that he was acting in a way that is consistent with someone who takes very, very seriously the teachings of Islam. And I want to try to make that point in the following clips and some other things that I'd like to say. Now, let me begin by saying that I believe there are many, many moderate, you might say, or nominal Muslims who would condemn what Nadal has done. But they are not the only ones in the Islamic religion. In fact, the ones who take it the most seriously, who take Islam at face value in what it teaches, have this to say. This is that radical Islamic cleric that Nadal was corresponding with. He said this in his blog after this tragic and despicable occurrence. He said, Nadal is a hero. He is a man of conscience who could not bear living the contradiction of being a Muslim and serving in an army that is fighting against his own people. He says any decent Muslim cannot live understanding properly his duties towards his creator and his fellow Muslims and yet serve as a U.S. soldier. The U.S. is leading a war against terrorism, which is in reality a war against Islam. He says, Nadal opened fire on soldiers who were on their way to be deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. How can there be any dispute about the virtue of what he has done? In fact, the only way a Muslim could Islamically justify serving as a soldier in the U.S. Army is if his intention is to follow in the footsteps of men like Nadal. He ends up by saying that the American Muslims who condemned his actions have committed treason against the Muslim Ummah, or the whole Muslim community worldwide, and have fallen into hypocrisy. And then he quotes Allah. He says, give tidings to the hypocrites that there is for them a painful punishment, those who take disbelievers as allies instead of the believers. Now, the point I want to make is that one does not need to be a card-carrying member of Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah to perpetuate this continuing cycle of Islamic fear and violence. This person did act alone, but he acted in the name of Allah. He did what he did because of his belief in the teachings of Islam. Now, in America, we want to downplay this because, of course, we're a very pluralistic society. Everyone has their right to believe anything they want to believe. And I will agree that the majority of Muslims in the United States are moderate to liberal to nominal Muslims. And they don't really believe all that is written in the Qur'an and the other writings. And it's a good thing, too. And I'll go into that in just a second, but I want you to see how much we try to bend over backwards to say it isn't what you think it is.
If he truly was a jihadist following orders to kill U.S. troops, terrorism experts say Nadal Hassan would have never been seen doing this, showing up in traditional Muslim clothing at a convenience store morning after morning. Pat Brown, a criminologist who profiles killers, says Nadal Hassan better fits the profile of a mass murderer.
He was simply a lone guy who had issues, problems, psychopathic behaviors that then escalated to the point where he wanted to get back at society, and he took it out on his workmates like most of them do.
A middle-aged, isolated Army major facing an internal crisis and about to snap.
So in this CNN segment, it appears the case is being made that the religion of Islam and his loyalty to it played really no part in his doing this despicable act. And yet, they have to say something about it because the evidence is so clear. Let's see what the segment says next.
There were red flags. Something was wrong. A PowerPoint presentation obtained by the Washington Post where Hassan talked of Muslims fighting for God. And the FBI says it even investigated Hassan in December when he was communicating with a person overseas believed to be a radical Islamic cleric. But that case was closed when it was determined Nadal Hassan's communications seemed more in line with his work as a psychiatrist than a terrorist plotting or conspiring.
Now, something you've got to take into consideration, and that is that if Muhammad, who is the founder of the religion of Islam, was himself a military commander and one who committed murder and other acts of violence, then why would it be inconsistent for devout followers of Islam to act in the same way?
Another example, that may be even more chilling, of the deleterious influence that Muhammad's example has upon the Islamic world was exemplified recently by an Egyptian leader of a radical Muslim party who wrote just recently that he couldn't believe that the beheadings in Iraq were being protested by Muslims. Weren't they aware that the Prophet Muhammad himself beheaded between 600 and 900 men personally, members of the Jewish Qurayza tribe in Arabia, after he had defeated them?
The story of Rabbi Qanina is a well-known documented story in Islam. Rabbi Qanina was tortured by the order of the Prophet of Islam himself. His eyes were put out. He was burned in order to confess where the Jewish tribes were hiding their goods, their gold and their silver and all those kind of things. And this is right from the Hadith. This inspired us as Palestinians, inspired us on fighting jihad against the Jews in Palestine.
Was Nadal Hassan a troubled individual? Was he devastated by the death of his mother? Did he have trouble getting girlfriends and so forth? Yes. Was he influenced by his devotion to the religion of Islam to do what he did? I think the evidence points to yes as well. And here's the troubling statistic for me. Even if in a world that has 1 billion plus people who say they are Muslims, who believe the teachings of the Qur'an, and you take 0.1% of those people who would be on the extreme devout side of that religion and believe everything, vehemently believe everything that's in the Quran, and potentially are either terrorists or spontaneous killers like this individual, then that's a very troubling number. And I am saying that the Quran, if taken seriously, a person who does what Hassan did is not acting inconsistent with the teachings of Islam. Now, some might say, well, you could say the same thing about Christianity and all the people who kill abortionists because they think they're doing God's will or in the name of Jesus. Well, let's talk about that in the next video.